The final outcome of the 2020 presidential election was finally projected today when major news networks such as CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News projected that Joe Biden would win the state of Georgia. Georgia was the very last state to be projected because it was very close between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. For a while, Donald Trump was leading in the state of Georgia. He had more votes in that state, but that was because not all the mail in ballots were counted. But once more and more mail in ballots started getting counted, Joe Biden was able to catch up to Donald Trump, and eventually, near the end of the counting, Joe Biden overtook Donald Trump in the state of Georgia. And the reason why mail in ballots lean heavily in favor of Joe Biden, there's not really one specific reason for that. It's not really that clear, but I guess one of the reasons why a lot of people are saying that Joe Biden voters are more likely to vote by mail than Donald Trump supporters is because Donald Trump told his supporters not to vote by mail but to vote in person instead. So that's probably the main reason why mail in ballots leaned in favor of Joe Biden and not in favor of Donald Trump. But that's besides the point. The point is, Joe Biden was projected to win the state of Georgia today, which means that we now know the final outcome of the 2020 presidential election, in that we now know how many electoral votes each candidate will get and which states each candidate will win, which states will get more votes for Joe Biden, which states will have more people voting for Donald Trump. And I'm making this video because I want to talk about how accurate was my prediction, because I made several prediction videos leading up to election day talking about what I thought the outcome would be for the 2020 presidential election, as in which candidate I thought would win each state. So I would just like to talk about how accurate my most recent prediction was for the 2020 presidential election. I made a prediction video, I think it was just the day before election day on November 2nd, 2020, and today is now November 13th, 2020. It was officially declared on November 7th, 2020 that Joe Biden would win this election, but that was before the states of Georgia were declared that Joe Biden would win that state. The state of Nevada was not yet decided, and Arizona was only decided by Associated Press and Fox News. But all these swing states have now been declared for either Joe Biden or Donald Trump. Mainly for Joe Biden, but North Carolina went for Donald Trump because he was up in that state for almost the entire time. So let's talk about that now. Let's talk about what I thought would happen and what actually happened. Actually, let's start off with what actually happened. We're going to talk about what the official results look like for the 2020 presidential election. So, first filling in all the safe states, we have all these northeastern states, no surprise here. All the west coast states, Illinois, New York, all these went for Joe Biden, no surprise there. They are heavily liberal states. Now for Trump states, all of these states out in the west, they are heavily conservative states. No surprise there, they're won by Trump. And then Kansas, Oklahoma, most of the south, most of the deep south went for Trump in pretty large numbers. No surprise there, Republicans always win these regions of the United States. Democrats always win the east and west coast. That's nothing new, but here are all the safe states shaded in. Alaska took a long time to project, but that's not because it was close. It was just because it was taking a long time for all the votes to be reported in that state. So Alaska went for Trump, Hawaii went for Biden. No surprise there, Hawaii is a pretty liberal state, Alaska's a pretty conservative state. Now we're getting to all the swing states, or at least all the states where it was kind of close between the two candidates. Virginia honestly wasn't even close. Joe Biden easily won that state. Same with Colorado and New Mexico. New Hampshire I thought would be close, but it actually was a pretty safe win for Biden. Same with the state of Maine as a whole, and the first congressional district. Iowa, I thought it would be a bit closer, but Trump won that state pretty handily. Same with Ohio. And now we get to all the states where it was kind of close. Texas was actually not that close. Many people were predicting that Texas would be really close between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, and that Donald Trump would only win by 1 or 2 percentage points, but I was kind of skeptical about this. I'm well aware of the fact that Texas has consistently become more and more liberal in the past decade, but I was also pretty sure that Texas would not become a blue state in this election. Maybe in 2024 it'll become a blue state if what has happened in the past decade continues to happen. Then Texas could become a blue state in as soon as 4 years from now. If not 4 years, then 8 years from now by 2028. But I was 99% sure Texas would still be won by Trump in this election, and I was correct on that. So Texas went to Trump, and then Minnesota went to Biden pretty easily. Even though Clinton only won that state by a couple percentage points 4 years ago, Biden won that state by a bigger margin this year in this election. And then Florida. Florida was actually called pretty early on for Trump. I was expecting this state to go for Biden, but it went surprisingly in favor of Trump. It went in favor of Trump more this time around than it did 4 years ago. 4 years ago, I believe the state of Florida only voted for Trump by around 1 percentage point, but this time around, it voted for Trump by around 4 percentage points. So I guess the state itself just got more conservative because overall Trump was a much better candidate 4 years ago than he is now. So that just means that the state itself is more conservative now than it was back then. Then Wisconsin wasn't projected on election night, but it was projected on November 4th, the day after election day. Sometime in the afternoon of November 4th, it was projected that Wisconsin would go for Biden. And then right after that, like an hour or two after, Michigan was also projected for Joe Biden. So these two states were called on November 4th, both Wisconsin and Michigan, but Pennsylvania took a lot longer than Wisconsin and Michigan to be called. Pennsylvania took, I believe, yeah, it was 4 days actually, because Pennsylvania is the state that gave Joe Biden the electoral votes he needed to win the election. Because look at this now, you have 252 electoral votes. I forgot to shade this in earlier, but Joe Biden also won Nebraska's second congressional district. This was a surprise to me. I was expecting Trump having a better chance of winning this district, but Biden was able to win this district. I don't think any Democrat has won this district at the presidential level since Obama in 2008, but Biden was able to win this district. That brought him to 253, and Biden was sitting at 253 for several days until finally he won the state of Pennsylvania on November 7th. It was officially projected on November 7th, last Saturday, that Biden would win Pennsylvania, and as you see here, Biden's at 273 now. That is why it was projected on November 7th that Biden would win this election, because it was projected then that he would win Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania gave him the electoral votes he needed to win. And then Maine's second district went to Trump. I was thinking it would be kind of close, but it still went to Trump. I predicted that. Nevada took a while to project, but it eventually went to Biden. Arizona was an interesting scenario because Fox News and Associated Press called Arizona for Biden very early on, but other news networks such as CNN and MSNBC waited for several days, and I believe they just did so yesterday. Just yesterday, they called Arizona for Biden, but even then, it was really close between Trump and Biden. For a while, it looked like Trump could have caught up, but in the end, Arizona went to Biden. And this is one of the states I predicted correctly. North Carolina. At first, it looked like North Carolina would be won by Biden. Biden was up, but that's because in North Carolina, they counted mail-in ballots before in-person ballots. Mail-in ballots lean more towards Biden, in-person ballots lean more towards Trump. So once all the in-person ballots started to come in, it leaned more and more in favor of Trump, and eventually Trump was able to win the state. Although it took many days to project the state of North Carolina for Trump because they wanted to be sure that every vote was counted and there was no chance of Biden making a comeback. So North Carolina went for Donald Trump in the end. It's kind of the opposite of the Rust Belt. The Rust Belt started out favoring Trump by a huge margin, but then it slowly went towards Biden. North Carolina was the exact opposite, favoring Biden at first, but then slowly went to Trump. Now, Georgia. This was the final state, and I believe that this is the state that really surprised everybody. Everybody was expecting this state to vote for Trump, or at the least vote to the right of Florida, meaning vote for Biden in a less big margin than it voted for Florida if Biden were to win Georgia. But even though Biden did not win Florida, he won Georgia. For a while, like I said, Donald Trump was up in Georgia. He had more votes there. It looked like he was going to win that state, but the mail-in ballots just kept coming in. They were not done counting it. There were a lot of ballots left to be counted in major cities in Georgia, such as Atlanta mainly. But once all the ballots were counted, once all the mail-in ballots started coming in and they were able to be counted, Joe Biden was eventually able to catch up to Donald Trump and overtake him. And it was officially projected earlier today that he's actually going to win the state of Georgia. So how does this compare to my prediction that I made the day before Election Day? Well, I'm happy to say that I was pretty close. I was only off by 2 states. Every swing state I predicted correctly except Georgia and Florida, which means that I was correct about the Rust Belt, I was correct about Arizona, I was correct about North Carolina, and I was even correct about all the Northeast and the congressional districts. The only state I was not correct about is Georgia and Florida because I thought Georgia would go to Trump, but Florida would go to Biden. I thought this would happen, Georgia, Trump, Florida, Biden, but it's actually the exact opposite in concerning these 2 states. Georgia went to Biden, but not Florida. I shaded in the wrong state. Florida went to Trump, not Georgia. Georgia went to Biden, surprisingly. This actually surprised me quite a lot because I was expecting the state of Georgia to go for Donald Trump, and I was expecting Georgia to vote to the right of Florida. What I mean by that is that I was expecting Georgia to vote more in favor of Trump than I was expecting Florida to do so. When I made that last prediction video right before Election Day, I was talking about how I was really unsure about Florida. I think I gave it tilt Biden, meaning I was really on the edge about it, but I narrowly gave Florida to Biden. But I said in that video there was a good chance Trump could win that state. I wouldn't be remotely surprised if Trump won, and I guess he won. But here's the thing: Trump actually won Florida by a bigger margin than I would have thought because I was thinking if he would win Florida, it would only be by 1 to 2 percentage points, but Trump actually won Florida by around 4 percentage points, which kind of surprises me. That just means that Florida itself has gotten more conservative. There are a couple different reasons why that could be the case. I'm not going to get into that now, but that surprised me how Florida voted for Trump by 4 percentage points, but then Joe Biden wins the state of Georgia. If you take a look at the 2016 presidential election, Donald Trump won the state of Florida by only around 1 percentage point, but he won the state of Georgia by 5 percentage points, which means that 4 years ago, Georgia voted to the right of Florida by around 4 percentage points at the presidential level, which means that back then, Georgia was a more conservative state than Florida was. But I guess something happened to Georgia in these past 4 years, or to Florida, or to both of those states, because now Georgia is voting to the left of Florida. Florida voted for Trump by around 4 percentage points, but Georgia just barely edged out for Joe Biden. Joe Biden is going to win the state of Georgia by just zero point 0.5 or less percentage points compared to Trump. It's going to be very close between Biden and Trump. For a while, Trump was ahead there, but Joe Biden was able to catch up at the last minute with those mail-in ballots. I'm not really sure what the final outcome will be because they still haven't counted every single vote, but they've counted enough votes to where they're pretty sure that Joe Biden will win the state of Georgia. Even if he doesn't win the state for whatever reason, if there's a recount that shows that Donald Trump should have won that state, even then he's still going to win the overall election, the presidential election, but he is most likely going to win the state of Georgia. The exact margin could change a bit from now, but it appears that Joe Biden is going to win the state of Georgia by less than 1 percentage point, which means that 4 years ago, Georgia voted to the right of Florida by 4 percentage points, but now Georgia is voting to the left of Florida by around 4 percentage points. So that's a pretty interesting shift. They basically swapped places. It used to be Georgia was a bit more conservative than Florida. Florida was usually considered a swing state. In 2000, Florida decided the election for George Bush by around 500 votes. In 2008, Barack Obama was able to win that state, as in 2012. In 2016, it was pretty close between Trump and Clinton for a while, but in the end, when all the panhandle votes were counted, then Trump was able to get ahead of Clinton and he won that state by 1 percentage point. During election night, it looked very close between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, and it looked like Joe Biden might have been able to win that state for a while, but once more and more of the in-person votes started getting added to the total, it then became clear that Donald Trump would win that state. The last thing I would like to talk about in this video now is the fact that Joe Biden won 306 electoral votes and Donald Trump won 232 electoral votes. The final score was 306 to 232. What I found very interesting about that is the fact that that's the exact same score as the 2016 presidential election. 306 to 232 is the exact outcome in the 2016 presidential election. The only difference between now and 4 years ago is that in 2016, Donald Trump got the 306, but in this election, Donald Trump got the 232. So it was the same amount of electoral votes, but different candidates who got those votes. I found that very interesting, meaning that in terms of the electoral college, not in popular vote, not in terms of the popular vote, we're talking about electoral college here. If we're talking about the popular vote, Democrats almost always win that, but because the electoral college, it favors rural votes more than urban votes, and there are more Republicans in rural areas, and that is why Republicans have an advantage when it comes to the electoral college. But in terms of the electoral college specifically, Joe Biden won this presidential election, the 2020 presidential election, by the same margin that Donald Trump won the 2016 presidential election 4 years ago. The margin between Joe Biden and Donald Trump in this election in the Electoral College was the exact same, literally the exact same as the margin 4 years ago between Trump and Clinton, except that 4 years ago Trump was on the winning end of that, and now Trump is on the losing end of that. I find that very interesting, and I would also like you to internalize that fact. However much Donald Trump won by 4 years ago, that's exactly the same amount as how much Joe Biden won by just now in this presidential election. When the 2016 presidential results were first finalized, I was thinking to myself that even though Donald Trump lost the popular vote, he won the Electoral College pretty handily. It wasn't even that close. Donald Trump won the Electoral College by a pretty good margin. He crossed the 300 electoral vote threshold, which means it wasn't that close. He won the Electoral College pretty comfortably. Granted, all the states that he needed to win the Electoral College, they were pretty close margins between him and Clinton. He won the state of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. All of them he won by less than 1 percentage point, but purely speaking in terms of the Electoral College, Donald Trump won that election pretty comfortably. And that means the exact same applies to Joe Biden now. Joe Biden won this election pretty comfortably. It wasn't even that close when talking about the Electoral College. Even if Donald Trump won Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia, Joe Biden would have still won this election, all because he was able to flip the Rust Belt back to his side. I predicted that Joe Biden would get somewhere between 290 and 350 electoral votes, and I'm happy to say that I was correct on that.